India is one of the fastest growing consumer markets today. We know that it is 10 billion, the value of the fast fashion in India in 2024, and it's going to export to 50 billion. Unfathomable. It's like 400% over 7 years, right? And domestic fast fashion brands are outperforming the international ones. And it's a very tricky market in that for a lot of Indians, upward mobility means globalization, which means I want to wear foreign brands, right?
Somebody who is from a lower or lower middle class, they just want to buy something new a little regularly, but they end up using those pieces for a very long time. So they are not the problem here. So if somebody comes and asks me that, hey, why are you producing sustainable fashion expensive because you're not solving the mass problem? No, it is the problem with the ones who do hauls and then throw those pieces in 2 or 5 months. They are the problem.
Aishwarya and I have discussed this a lot. There needs to be a lot of support from the government and the system as such for sustainable brands to thrive. And there needs to be an awareness at large in terms of what it means to buy a piece of clothing just other than the price point.
Aishwarya and Adhiraj, welcome to Custodians of Crafts by Subject Matter. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good, and I really like that name, Custodians of Crafts.
Excited for this.
I'm really excited to speak to you guys, specifically brands which are working in sustainability. As you can imagine, I feel like sustainability is truly a systems, it's systems thinking. You have to look at it from various lenses, socioeconomic, environmental, and of course, financial lens. So it's always interesting to speak to brands who are doing it. How do you then look at interdependencies and feedback loops? So let's dive in. I'm going to start with something you guys already know, how you guys met. You both met as undergraduate students at the Institute of Chemical Technology in Mumbai, and you studied fiber science and textile chemistry. Further went to do your master's in the US and then returned to India in 2022. And then you started 8.Jiwya in 2023. What led you to focus then on launching a brand which is heritage-based and planet-friendly textiles? What led you to this point?
That's completely the story of 8.Jiwya. Seeking solutions to many problems that you mentioned at the start. The socioeconomic lens of sustainability, the planet lens of sustainability, the financial lens of sustainability. I would say once we started solving all of these questions individually is when we got to the solution that it has to be hyper-local heritage and better materials married together to make something that we now call 8.Jiwya.
So you've had several lives. Your first life was as textile scientist, and now you're founders of a fashion brand. What if this was an alternate universe and you were not either? What path do you think your life would have taken you?
You want to go, Adhiraj?
Oh, that's interesting. I am really into travel. I think I would do something on those lines. Maybe sustainable tourism. That's something that's interesting.
I am a person with many heads inside one head. So honestly, it's difficult for me to pick what would be an alternate life. But bringing about a change has been a very, very deep-rooted thing right somewhere in my heart. So I always believe, and you never know, I probably would end up doing this in 4 or 5 years from now. I would open a school which is absolutely different from a typical school systems where children study and grow and become better people in general and lead fuller lives. So I might end up doing that. You never know. But I would have been in teaching children and basically bringing a reform in education.
Speaking of travel, this is something I found online, and I was quite surprised that, in 2023, both of you traversed 19,000 kilometers across 19 Indian states. First of all, I think everybody wants to do that. Not a lot of people have traveled India that much. Not a lot of Indians have traveled India that much. Then you spoke to around 150 artisans, and a lot of them are now associated with 8.Jiwya. Today, you collectively employ a significant population of this artisan group, around 33,000 people, including hand embroiderers, printers, block makers, and farmers. This was very exciting for me. I feel like this model is based on making very few quantities of a specific design with these artisans. And then, you obviously recognize the additional time and the additional cost that it takes to do it. So let's talk about your business. What moment and frustration led you to this? What is the difference between a conventional fashion business cycle that led you to invent your own supply chain this way?
So there is so much wrong with the textile industry as a whole, and especially when it comes to fashion and clothing, right? It starts from using synthetic materials that are not just polluting to the environment, but also unethically made. Wages are not paid. People are exploited in the process. That is one. It goes to toxic chemicals, synthetic dyes. The entire supply chain itself needs to be revamped and rethought of basically. And when it comes to the consumer as well, fast fashion has fueled consumers to make garments almost use and throw. They use it a couple of times and they throw it because it is so cheap without knowing the impact behind that action. So, us as textile scientists, we really wanted to make a change in the entire supply chain and not just focus on one aspect of that, which a lot of brands in the market are doing today. So that, I mean, there was not one point as such, but it was a frustration built up over years, wherein nobody was making the change. Everybody knew sort of what to do, but nobody was taking the leap and going head on to make that change.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I think the collective lives we were leading in our individual jobs and work, one thing that was common is both of us were trying to bring a change internally. How can I replace one bad chemical with other? How can I improve a process line? How do we bring about a change in the production itself or the effluents it releases? And we were getting hit by roadblocks one after another from big companies, Fortune 500, enough money to make a change. And I think whenever we came back from work and discussed at home, this thing came again and again that if you have money, why would you not do good? What is the problem here? Until we realize the larger cycle of it. Of course, the entire synthetic material chain is funded by fossil fuel lobbies. So, of course,
Yeah.
it's big money, both marketing wise and materials wise. So, and then we thought, let's show how change can be done. And I guess that feeling led to starting Jivya.
And why was that critical?
So I guess after coming back from the US, we spent 6 months or more just researching on materials and
Okay.
figuring out the feasibility of what material to use at each stage. Fiber, yarn, color, chemistries, a lot of dyeing experiments to make sure plant colors that we wanted to use are giving the efficacy that we wanted and shades that we wanted. And at the end of those 6, 7 months, the first thing that came is this is good, the materials are good, all is great, but fashion is expressing through your body. And this is an old idea. When we were colleagues back in Institute of Chemical Technology, we used to just talk that India has so many textile arts. And there was a bench in the basement of the library that was our bench where we used to sit and study together. And I guess one day we just found some books about textile arts and we just got deep into reading about it. And we just discussed that it will be so much fun to have all Indian textile arts under one roof someday. This was way
Yeah.
back in 13, 14. I don't even remember when. And one day we were just taking a stroll in our neighborhood jogging park and we were like that this park is not coming to the materials yet. And it was more of a unanimous thing that both of us were like, what if we get all the arts in that we always talked about? And after that, like a mad scientist, both of us got back home. We started mapping out, we started researching clusters. 1 month of us only just researching clusters because there are most of these addresses are not to be found. And
Yeah.
I would say that's our biggest IP. We found them at their sources, met them, traveled across. So I guess once we realized that these two ideas coming together would bring such a big change, both climate and social justice side. So I guess there was no stopping after that.
About why we traveled. So today we see brands like Prada and Dior, even Manish Malhotra using heritage Indian arts. How many
Yeah.
artisans do you know that they've worked with? There is absolutely no transparency. So we wanted to bring the name, not the name, but the work of the artisans to the forefront. That which is why it was very important for us to personally meet them, develop a one-on-one relationship, and understand their story. What are the challenges that they have? Why are they not working with natural materials? Why are they? We just blame the artisans that everybody's working with polyester, but why? How can we help them as a new brand establish certain new techniques, new methods? So it was a lot of collaborative process, which was not otherwise possible on a phone call or Google Meet call. So we had to go in person and
Absolutely.
understand.
Yeah, in a very short period of time that I've been visiting clusters myself many years ago, I don't have the experience that you guys have in the breadth of the artisans you visited. That's the first thing. You cannot reach some of these villages where these crafts are basically held on through generations on a phone call. And the second thing is, a lot of them pass on the craft generation to generation. Of course, there's a lot of reluctance to do that now because it's not yielding the kind of revenue a lot of artisans would want. But a lot of times, even if they want to continue, the challenges are, do we get the raw material to make that blanket or that textile? And is that raw material then silk or cotton thread or a polyester thread in the nearest like village shop? So it's a very minutia of like thinking. When you're in any one of the big cities in India, you're buying craft at a showroom, you're not thinking that that is the decision making an artisan might be doing. So I really commend you on that. Very, very
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about Indian consumers, because I know that Jivya has international ambitions. You're already present on an international scale, and we'll talk a little bit about more about why. But if we look at India today, I want you to throw a little bit light on the idea of sustainable consumption versus fast fashion. So there is a lot of interesting reports, and I will just throw some interesting facts for our listeners. First and foremost, there is a survey by Statista in 2021 which said that a lot of Indians claim to buy, sustainable products. Of course, it's self assessment. The percentage is 89. I was very surprised. I'm going to link this study as well in the chat. But also, India is one of the fastest growing consumer markets today. We know that it is 10 billion, the value of the fast fashion in India in 2024, and it's going to explode to 50 billion. Unfathomable. It's like 400% over 7 years, right? And domestic fast fashion brands are outperforming the international ones. So I'm not surprised there is either. And it's a very tricky market in that for a lot of Indians, upward mobility means globalization, which means I want to wear foreign brands, right? Like even if you grow around the ethos of sustainability, which is hand-me-downs and handmade, the aspiration is to put your money behind a known international brand. So as founders, how are you navigating this? Because there is a mass scale production and then there is truly planet positive production. I don't think there's a lot of overlap. I could be wrong. So that would love to know what you guys think about Indian landscape today and how brands like yourself are navigating this consumption pattern.
I'm not surprised with the Statista study because we have been facing that last 2 years, and that has also been part of the reason of the international expansion. Of course, we can get to that separately. But when it comes to Indian consumers, it's a tricky market because of variety or diversity of different classes who and how they perceive buying. For example, somebody who is from a lower middle class, they just want to buy something new a little regularly, but they end up using those pieces for a very long time. So they are not the problem here. So if somebody comes and asks me that, hey, why are you producing sustainable fashion expensive because you're not solving the mass problem? No, it is the problem with the ones who do hauls and then throw those pieces in 2 or 5 months. They are the problem. The ones who can buy lesser and wear it for longer time are already doing it because of financial reasons mostly. And then the middle to upper middle class and the HNIs, and they are the ones who end up just being extremely extravagant and throwaway culture propagator of fashion, I would say. So that's part one of it when it comes to why we are segmented, how we are segmented. Of course, the making cost by default of something like Jivya is itself high. So like layer one is that, layer two is this behavior. At the same time, when it comes to aspirations, I would say that's also a very colonial mindset because we look up to the West that they are better than us. Because a brand is using more models which are white skinned, they would be superior than us. And I don't blame at least the people until our parents' generation, but I do blame our generation. There's a blog about Jivya that goes up today, and I wrote that, and in that I wrote this line, and it's just coming perfectly well here, that my great-grandparents would be somebody who lived when India was still under British rule, and they were probably treated as second-class citizens or they were oppressed. My grandparents were kids in that they also saw independent India, and they're still here seeing the growth. And my parents were the first generation born in pre-India. So I can understand if these three generations share the, I would say, oppression or stories or that mindset that they were constantly made to feel second class. But I am comparatively free of it. I can break that mindset. And if I am still looking at only legacy or European or foreign brands as the one better than any Indian brand, I am honestly not giving enough credit to the history of handlooms and other things in India because they have been much older than those legacy brands itself. So it says first to dismantle that mindset that only those are better. That's another thing. We also treat anything Indian as not so good. Because we assume that the person would be doing jugaad, if I can use that word, which is, is not always true. Like you said at the start, it's a multi-layer, multifaceted issue when it comes to India. And of course, the answering of questions when it comes to a survey is just moral, and you don't have to show how you act on it. When it comes to actually acting on it, the behavior is very, very different.
Yeah, for sure. When I read the survey, I was like, this is probably self-assessment, and we all like to believe that we put our money in the right place.
I just want to say that we have to consider that a large population of India is still middle class. Is still someone who has to, make their ends meet. Especially for those people, price sensitivity is a big issue, no matter what we say. And sustainable fashion does come at a cost, rightly so, because of the safe, sustainable materials that it uses and the ethical practices that are supposed to be followed. So when you compare that with a fast fashion brand, which is presenting you a similar T-shirt for a fifth of the cost, an average middle class consumer is going to gravitate towards that just because of the price point. They're not going to go think anything else but just the price. Ishwar and I have discussed this a lot. There needs to be a lot of support from the government and the system as such for sustainable brands to thrive, and there needs to be an awareness at large in terms of what it means to buy a piece of clothing just other than the price point aspect of it. So there is an awareness coming in the upper strata of society, but that needs to trickle down to all levels of society, I would feel.
And regulations. I mean, you are allowing a fast fashion giant to survive with much better subsidies, whereas you are charging much higher tax to a cotton farmer. It speaks where the regulations are siding. And I mean, the recent GST, I wrote about it. The taxation on the materials is very different. And fossil fuel derived materials have been given good tax cuts.
Yeah. I'll link your blogs as well when this goes out. So if anybody wants to read, we are talking about a country with a very, very high socioeconomic split. So it's always a conundrum that, yes, if it's going to be cheaper, anybody would buy cheaper clothes. It could be as simple as Shein being launched into a country which is I think, to me, appalling. I think in a country where there are so many domestic brands which are trying to produce at that price point, even if you don't look at the sustainability parameter, I think it's wild that we have another international giant launching into the country. So I totally agree with you. I think it really has to trickle down from the top, but I think the onus of the responsibility lies towards lawmakers, not so much the consumer. And
no, it is absolutely true. I mean, look at it. Who is getting Shein into India? One of the world's fifth largest and India's largest polyester producer. Why would they not? I mean, they're looking at profit. It was lawmakers' responsibility at that point to tell them, like, hey, put a cap on it. You can't bring this further. But they're allowing it.
Yeah. As we're speaking today, EU launched a regulation last week, which basically puts the responsibility of the end of the life cycle of a textile on the seller of the brand. I would say that it's going to penalize a lot of big brands, so they will have to clean their supply chain in some format or the other, or they face penalties. And I think that's really the way to do it. Well, EU does regulations a bit too well, I would say, so there is definitely pros and cons. Let's move on to a little bit more about the design. So one thing which I always felt about sustainable brands, I started in the sustainability field, just for context, in 2016 with Fashion Revolution India. So very different time. Always when you look at sustainable brands, it would be really boring designs. Not gonna lie. Like, I was in my 20s and I was like, it's great. One, it's expensive, but also I don't think it fits my vibe. So, but things have changed. And I love your designs for that. They're very, very modern. They are very placeable in a tube in London or in Metro in Paris. I would totally see people wearing those designs anywhere in the world, and still has a very coded Indian identity. But now things have changed everywhere. So you have other brands doing pretty much similar kind of ethos and similar designs. So what are the key difference you feel like, say, with a Doodlage or a No Nasties, all great brands doing interesting and very, very modern designs with a very Indian DNA? What is the difference, both in terms of design, but you can also tell me in general as a business, between those brands and you today?
I am more than happy when multiple brands are putting Indian crafts at the stage it deserves. So, and it's like, if you tell 3 kids to draw mountains, all of them going to have different version of that mountain. And all of them are going to be beautiful. It's like, who wants to buy that particular painting? Which kid's painting? It's actually on the eyes of the person who's wanting to buy that. You have to understand who is your target consumer and what are they going to like, and what are their aspirations, or how they look at their bodies, or how you would maybe want them to look at their bodies. So I would say these factors play a big role in getting Indian arts into the designs we are putting at Jivya, and also the fact that we want them to feel globally accepted. Like, something of a native Indian print you would only see on a dupatta or a sari, which is great. But does the world wear that? They don't. However, it was taken from India, checks. The checks that went from Madras to England and then went all over the world. And now checks is such an accepted pattern that you pick any man on the street and ask them, what's your preferred style of shirt? And they will say checks. He's wearing checks right now. It's very normal, and that didn't come out of nowhere. That actually came from lungis from southern
Yeah.
India. So, two things: one, making something prominent, and second, still keeping the roots alive. I think these two things become a very central part of designing any jewelry piece.
Super clear. Yeah.
And with regards to the business aspect of it, I think where we differentiate ourselves is being truly slow fashion and made to order. So, for example, if you come to our studio right now, we would hardly have 10 pieces ready because we don't want to overproduce. We only want to make a particular piece when the order comes in. And then we tell our customer we are a slow fashion brand. It is going to take you 2 days. It is going to take us 2 days. So we believe that there doesn't need to be any wastage of sort. I mean, we're also zero waste in our production. Our scraps are generated, which are typically 10 to 15% for each garment. We repurpose those scraps and we reuse them as accessories or fixtures for our new designs. And obviously, our ethos is being 100% plant based, so that supersedes everything. We do not use an ounce of synthetic material or animal based sources in our products. So the wonderful brands that you listed, none of them are truly 100% plant based. If I can claim that, because the level of minute focus that we have gone to ensure that even the stitching thread is 100% cotton, which is something that, at least to my knowledge, no other brand in India is doing. So things like that, use smaller things, tags, ropes. So that does differentiate us from every other brand there is in the market, and positions us in a completely different 100% plant-based category, and not just any other sustainable brand.
Yeah, that's really important. The trims go into the landfill as well, the zips and the threads, etc. That's a big element of waste. When you guys were going into these craft clusters and you were looking at all these artisans' work, was there some level of decision making in that this craft will be more financially viable than the other, or you wanted to go more with the conviction that this is an exceptional product and this is an exceptional craft, nobody wants to talk about it, and we'll take the lead on that? So what was more like, was it a business focused to begin with, so you have some level of product market fit, or you have more of like, let's just do it because this is exciting?
Yeah. So at that point, it was not a business decision at all. We wanted to get as many wonderful arts under our roof as possible. And once we had all of them, then we decided sort of where to position which art so that the piece, it adds to the beauty of the piece and also does not make it way too expensive for the consumer to purchase. So that was a secondary decision, but it was definitely to support and get every possible art under.
And it is to this date the same, that even if it's a difficult weave, even if it's a kind of structure that we are reviving and preserving. I'll tell a very simple story. We made 4 meters of a material and made a very beautiful dress out of it. And we were at our exhibit in Hyderabad, and a customer came. She liked it and she wanted in her size. Kudos to her as well. She asked her how much time will it take to customize it. And we said it will take at least 2 months. It took us 3 months because monsoons hit our artisans area, and he works on a pit loom. So the soil where he sits, it's a gadda where you sit. It was not easy enough to work there. So he avoided working there for 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks. She was patient. However, we kept communicating with her that, hey, this particular weave is difficult. It's taking time, but we are on it. We are not ignoring that. And I would say I was completely happy with the entire situation, how it turned out. And it's one of the most beautiful weaves we have. And I can't really pick which is the most beautiful one we have, but the patience it takes. Something like this always precedes whether we want to use that material and how much of a business decision it should be.
Somebody on this podcast before said that fashion starts with rainfall, and it's like the DNA of fashion. People don't understand, but fashion starts with farmers. So speaking of artisans, do you have a small case study or an example you want to share with an artisan group that really embodies the spirit of Jivya, that worked with you guys, and then the impact they saw? It can be any time duration, 3 months, 6 months, or maybe one retail cycle. I know you guys don't operate in the specific retail models, but would love to know if you have an example to share with us.
So there is an artisan based in central India whose primary art is the Maheshwar weave, which is quite famous in central India. And it's primarily silk or mix of silk cotton. Cotton never becomes a primary thing. Amazing person, always interested in experimenting. When we visited him, he showed all the beautiful things. So that's the thing. The thing that is common with all artisans we met is once we told them that this is what we're trying to do and this is our vision, they were all on board because everybody wanted to preserve their art and keep trying something new. We keep forgetting that these are not business people, these are artisans in the end. They enjoy their craft. So for this particular person, when we told him that, hey, great work, but we don't use silk, what can we do? And we produced about 10 meters of Maheshwar weave in Khadi. You wouldn't imagine the beauty, the softness, and the shine. Khadi doesn't shine generally. But with the extra weft, how he puts, and the design structure we created with him, and we met him again recently that, the 10 meters we made two very simple pieces. Those were bespoke and singular, and they have been sold since, and the customers love them. And he was like, let's meet, come at my home for a week and we'll see what can we do. And since I made those weaves for you, I started experimenting so much that I made an entire project of 500 meters with that structure. I mean, not with our materials, but with that extra weft that he was putting for the diamond weave we wanted, that he ended up selling that entire batch in one go. And he was like, glad we could experiment. I was like, glad you were open to it so we can try something new. So I wouldn't say directly because, like you said, our retail cycles are very different. We don't really purchase from every artisan every month or so. We rather work with their farming season, their coloring season, and their weaving season like that. So I'm just glad that giving an avenue opened so many more for this person, and this is true for many of our artisans. If this is how most of them work.
You just basically give a playground for the artisans to do what they want. And I think while this is exciting, I do have a question on, you're very uncompromising on the way, you want to use good materials. You want to obviously showcase crafts and arts, in whether it's weaving or embroidery or block print, in the best way possible. But there is going to be a challenge in scaling. And I think I just want to understand from you, what are the operational challenges you foresee, you're already facing today, or you foresee in the future, in a supply chain which is one that vast and diverse, but also slower than the usual supply chain of fashion.
I was just saying that first thing we have to remember that at Jivya, we are never ever going to compete with any fast fashion brand in its supply chain or its production cycle. They literally have 52 micro seasons. I cannot be producing new collections every weekend. That's impossible. And we will be producing 2 collections a year and a couple limited edition pieces through the year. So you are looking at an SKU of 40, 50 through a year, which is very controlled, very manageable. And this is also our solution to how can we make sure that particular structure of weave and material can be made in one long run. Because how handlooms work is they cannot just make 10, 20, 30, 40 meters. Once the warping of the spinning and the warping of the yarn is done, it's better for them as well to churn it out in one large go. That is what we have understood with each artisan when we visited and stayed with them. So we already understood that if we don't scale up to a decent level, it's not going to be feasible for them to be making these materials on the looms and churning out 5 or 10, 20, 30 meters of it. So that is also the reason why we are limiting our SKUs and focusing on bespoke design, so that it becomes a steady source of one kind of material, at least for a fixed amount of time for that person, while they have already learned the creation of that art with our material. That Adhiraj would be the person telling you the numbers of it. Basically, we want to also promote being slow, trying to buy investment pieces that you care for a long period of time. And anytime you want to buy a new investment piece, like the old one needs either upcycling from us or you want to buy a new one, then you remember that, okay, Jivya is the brand from which I can trust and get pieces that last a lifetime, and they are investment pieces, they are safe for my skin, and they are beautiful in the journey. And I guess he would be the numbers person.
There are not too many challenges, but the first one is obviously that you said it's very complex because there are a lot of different unorganized artisans. It's not like a typical supplier that you sign contracts and everything is set. There are different languages, different cultures that you have to adapt to. Also correct, they work with different materials, so you have to make sure that you have space on their machine, on their loom, for your material. And second, this is more from the customer side with natural colors. Because of the season, the type of soil, water, the color can change year to year. So if I make a particular fabric for this season, and if a customer requests the same next year, I might not be able to get this exact same shade. So there is a certain limitation to how many pieces we can make at one time. That is a physical limitation. So as Aishwarya said, we cannot compete. We don't want to compete with someone who can make 1,000,000 meters at a time and then keep selling that for 10 years. So that is one. And doubling down on what Aishwarya said, we want to be consciously slow. We want to have limited edition drops so that the people who are buying a premium product would be happy to buy something exclusive. that only maybe a 50 others have across the world. And then that definitely adds to the exclusivity to the wearable artwork that they're purchasing from us.
So the goal when we started Jivya was to have the largest diversified impact in the space of fashion, and that is still the goal. However, this ties up to the early question we were discussing at the start of the podcast as well about the pricing and where we are placed, etc. A big part of fashion's impact also is where it is placed and how it reaches across the various socioeconomic classes. Fashion trickles down. So we do want to reach a stage where Jivya becomes that trusted voice in regenerative and plant-based fashion and sustainable fashion. And that will give us the time and the window to probably create a simpler, affordable premium product as well, which is, I would say, 5 to 7 years away. And where we can consciously think which art will be picking business first to make the affordable version of these things, while the exclusive one stays how it is, because that's how, of course, we started. So that is definitely the thought process and the vision in the long term, to have that larger impact, but it will take slower steps, and we are heading towards that direction.
Yeah, I totally see that. And as a consumer, I think it's very important to also understand that a brand which might be out of reach, the unit economics only becomes better with more adoption. So it's the life cycle. I think a certain premium segment of India is, like you said, you spoke about the woman who was patient to get her dress made. I think they will definitely respond very well to a product like yours. So thank you for all your insights. We're reaching the last part before we get into some, like rapid fire style questions. And this part is called decolonization, everybody's favorite topic. But I think it's definitely the ethos of what we do as subject matter. We don't explicitly say it, but that is a very critical part in fashion as a cultural movement today. So I wrote an essay recently which was titled, "If you want to sell in India, you need to understand India's colonized legacy." And it was basically not as a burden, but any international brands who are trying to penetrate the Indian market today, because it is a big consumer market, even though maybe our spending is not as high as other parts of Asia. But there is a burden that you have to overcome to understand that we still operate from a lens of having gone through colonialism not too far away. Like, Aishwarya mentioned, our parents' generation was the first generation in free India. It's just a generation away. For our generation, of course, there's a lot more understanding. And now we also have a very big Indian diaspora. So there is a lot more communication, like the Prada case that happened recently. So I'll come down to the question. So what is decolonizing fashion to you? Because it's a core to your vision. And can you just give me a little bit more insight on why this was so critical to you?
Like you said about subject matter as well, this is something at the base and the heart of Jivya. It was just a matter of time that we coined it, that we are doing it. So it was, unfortunately, Industrial Revolution was something that happened when colonialism was quite rampant across the global south. So the businesses and the structures we know today are a byproduct, or I would say a result of that. So we only know endless growth. Why do businesses only know endless growth? Why are you considered a successful business only when you are churning million meters every day or something? Do you understand? This is why we have climate issues today. We are just filling our landfills and using an n number of chemicals and all of those things, and then creating more problems. Whereas the global south had so many holistic structures. When you take a certain village who has a certain type of weave that they practice, they have a loom maker, they have a block maker, they have a color maker, they have a person who only spins yarn, they have a person who only warps the yarn to be prepared for the loom. And this is just the textile part of it. The same would be true for the primary food or the crop they grow. And this is such a nice hyper-local economy. And then that particular village is only famous for making that particular fabric, which everybody knows can be made in this dimension. So every summer you go, you can buy that. This is a mindset people knew beforehand. For example, let's take Maheshwar. Anytime I'm visiting Central India, which is generally not in the summer because it gets hotter in that area, if I go in the winters, I will buy a Maheshwar sari for myself, for example. Now you know you will be buying only if you go in winters, and how often do you go? Once or twice a year. So this way you have a controlled demand for what you're buying. And the other part is the colonist mindset, which has now got a new word, capitalism or consumerism, is you have to buy something new every day, and there is a big billion-dollar marketing giant feeding that to us every day. Through influencers, through our feeds, through algorithms, through social media, that do you have the FOMO? You are not on the trend. I'm okay not being on the trend. I will wear the same black t-shirt 20 years. What's the problem? So breaking this thought process becomes the heart at Jivya. And then we went nano level on that. Every single step. Okay, if I'm using this, why am I using this? If I'm using that, why am I doing that? To the buttons we use, to the fabrics we use, Adhiraj hinted on the labels. The care label that goes on our pieces, they are unbleached cotton as well. We could have used bleached cotton. We could have said our care labels are cotton. But we went a step ahead. No, it should be unbleached. You shouldn't have used the extra water as well. So this thinking of how to preserve, that is decolonization. Letting go of just using the resources just because you have them right now, that is the colonist mindset that we're trying to break, and that becomes the heart. Sorry for the long answer, and it's a very touchy
No,
subject as well.
I mean, longer the better. Like, I think getting into the nuances of a topic like this, it takes some.
Yeah. So that's my thought on it, and that's how we bring it for Jivya.
During Indian colonization, we've seen decimation of textile crafts, handlooms. Do you have any examples of any traditional practices or indigenous wisdom that you have revived since you've launched Jivya? I'm sure like there are many, but any one example that you can tell a little bit more about?
You want to go ahead with Kala cotton?
Yeah, please. Kala cotton is something that we also we knew about, but we discovered more so and so when we got into Jivya. So it is a very unique form of indigenous form of cotton that grows in certain parts of the country. So it is completely rain fed, which means it does not use the 2,500 liter per garment irrigated water consumption that it needs. Plus, it is also pesticide free, so it only grows in the drought prone regions of certain parts of India. So now, when we use a fiber like that, just by choosing that over any other fiber, creates a positive carbon footprint on our garments, right? We save a lot of pesticides, water.
Yeah, and if I may add, basically, once you start using a fiber like Kala cotton, you honestly cannot work on power looms because the fiber itself is indigenous. It has its own texture, its feel, and it has a certain uniqueness to it, which is actually more centric to using hand spinning and hand weaving. So a charkha and a loom work better for it. It gives the feel that you want, and we have at least 4 or 5 different varieties of weave that only use Kala cotton. And
Okay.
I would say that particular, and it is a primary fiber we have used in the upcoming London collection as well,
I saw
because it's a
that.
spring summer collection. Yeah, that's just one example. Jute comes equally well. We have 4 or 5 different density and thickness of jute that we use. Again, majority of the Western world that I know have not heard of the fiber jute. So I guess reviving right from the fiber stage and then including those in the weave structures we are trying to preserve. For example, when we use Kala cotton, we go with because it's a fiber primarily grown in Kutch and Rajasthan or those boundaries, we do go with the typical Vankar style, which was born out of the shepherds community of Gujarat. So if it's a fiber native to them, why not use the native way of making it? And then we go forward from that.
I didn't know that it's the shepherd community that works on it primarily. So that's pretty cool. Like you guys are pretty much like a dictionary of textiles in a brand form. I think something like this is very exciting for me as somebody who just loves Indian textiles. So thank you for sharing that. Okay. So we have a fast question rapid fire round. Let's go. One Jivya piece that's become your personal staple.
I'm forgetting the collar style. It's basically, we have a typical collar style. That unisex jacket has become my personal staple. I just pair it with anything. It's a relaxed collar jacket.
The Neil shirt, which is like a quintessential indigo blue
Indigo.
standard shirt, but it looks
Yeah.
really, really cool.
Yeah, I'll add pictures of both to the conversation. Okay. Craft or artisan cluster that you basically personally feel the strongest connection to. I know
I
this is
cannot answer that.
It just happened. So since I manage the most of the artisan network, just happened to me this morning. There's one in Gujarat that do a very specific kind of weaving that is called Sujni, and he's just so passionate about what he does, and he's just amazing to work with. So, yeah, I would say that. When we have just one piece made from him so far, which is a one of a kind piece jacket.
Yeah, I would say there is a form of self weave. The artisan is actually a graduate in arts from one of the most
JJ School of
prestigious
Arts.
schools in Bombay, JJ School of Arts. Yet he chooses to perceive his handloom, and even the people, even the production and sewers and seamstresses that we have, they don't believe when I say this was made on handloom. It's such beautiful art, and I just love discussing the specifics of the self weave technique with him. So I love that part, but I cannot pick an art cluster.
fair, fair. So what are you guys reading or listening during your travels? I know like you're traveling a lot. internally and internationally? What are you listening to or reading?
I love reading takes on Indian mythology when it comes to a fresher take on it. So a lot of Amish, a lot of Chitra Banerjee, Devgurni. I love the way she puts the woman at the center of how she imagined that timeline to have happened. That is one thing. And then second is I keep rereading a lot of Khalid Hosseini. I keep rereading a lot of Jane Austen. Every time I read it, I find a different perspective. So that's so far my go-to. Sometimes when I don't want to feel different emotions, I reread so that I know the kind of emotions I'll be going through.
I listen to music all the time. Just music, yeah, whatever music.
Yeah, I'm the same. I need something going in the background
Yeah.
at all time. Okay, so 3 words that you associate with Jivya.
Plant-based, handmade, and I would say bespoke.
Say pure, handmade, and meaningful.
Okay, what is a hidden talent that not everybody knows?
Like about individually, about
Personally, yes.
yeah, I think I can say this. Only my close circles know this. I am amazing at gardening, doing my compost and everything. I've started last 4 5 years being very conscious about how much waste I generate, and in the turn, I have made amazing compost that I distribute all over my neighborhood.
That's super cool. What about you, Adhiraj?
Say I sing decent. I'm better than a
Okay.
bathroom singer, but I'm very conscious singing in front of a lot of people.
I feel like you have the baritone.
Yes.
All right, some more about Jivya pieces because we want to give, as much context to Jivya to anybody who's listening and watching. What is your go-to Jivya piece for? There are 3 occasions, so you guys can pick a special occasion, a daily comfort piece, and for travel.
I would pick the jacket. There are 2, 3 which have some variety, but they all are equally relaxed. The Surajmukhi or the Bhuro, those jackets are my go-to for travel because I get cold very easily, especially in flights and other places. For every day, I would pick the Eka shirt because it's like 100% Kala cotton and it's as breathable and airy it can get. And for special occasion, I love the Mogra gown as well as the Moti corset dress, depending on whether it's a dress kind of party or a gown. But those two are my picks.
I think she answered for the both of us, except the gown part, of course.
Yeah. Perfect. Those are all the rapid fire questions, but I do have one question which I missed, I think, which I would love to know. And this is critical because you're like going on that journey now. What are your international ambitions? Like, I know you are working with international retailers and you are showcasing in London. You have built connections there and you want to go further. What are the ambitions? What would success look like?
I think the first would be to have presence in every major city of the world, and we have started very slowly. Obviously, the final one would be to have Jivya synonymous to plant-based fashion. So when anyone thinks of, oh, I want to buy something that's plant-based, I think of Jivya, and it is available in a store near me. So that is something, whether it be our own store or it be in a collaboration with another multi-brand retailer who also focuses on sustainability. That is something that we aspire to do.
I have a follow up to that. So, to an international audience, is there already some context? What are the typical kind of questions that you get asked when you take your product to an international audience?
Honestly, lesser than Indian audience. The
I
moment we
assume
The moment we say plant based, the primary question we get from there are two actually. If it is fashion or textile centric audience who understands fabrics a little more, their
yeah.
question would be, okay, how can I style it? How would it feel on my skin? And how do I care about it? But a person who just buys clothing in general but wants to be conscious and not that much into fabric, we do get questions from them like, oh, when you say plant based, that does that mean it will not last a lifetime or the color will fade into washes or something? But the second part is true for generally everywhere in the world. What we do like about international audiences is the moment we say it involves Indian arts, they want to know more. They want to know the story, they want to know the history, and the more they get to know, I feel I hear more value and more, I would say, love coming from there.
And I would like to add, I've had conversations with people who worked with textiles which are made on handlooms. We had Rachna, who runs a textile studio in Thailand, actually. And this is a myth when we think that they're less durable, a handmade product or a plant. I have had products, I've thrown them into the washer and they have come out just the way it is. Of course, you need to understand what settings to use, and you have to, as any product, right? You don't treat wool and silk and cotton the same way, but they're really durable products. And this is really a myth, which is again conditioning over years of buying from fast fashion retail that it's not sturdy. It is as sturdy and probably even more. So Thank you for that, both of you. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. And I think the idea that there is a brand, which to me, I think you're a dictionary of Indian textiles, and you are putting that into the business world, which is very exciting. So thank you for offering us that option. And I hope you're really successful in taking this product to the world.
Thank you, Rini. We enjoyed the conversation as well. These were such fresh questions and perspectives with respect to decoding what we do and how Jivya stands. And I actually thoroughly enjoyed all of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was lovely chatting with you, and we're also really happy and just with whatever you're doing across the world, trying to create awareness and learn new things about new brands. So that's amazing.
Yeah, and we wish the very best for Subject Matter to keep bringing good, interesting guests and putting their stories out for more and more people to listen. So, all the very best to what you do as well. And that's equally, if not more important. People need to be aware and understand, and you're doing that job. So, thank you.